Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Development Standards Committee, Tuesday the 17th September. Can I remind everyone this meeting is being recorded, but it's also being broadcast live on the Angus Council YouTube channel. And I can remind all those joining us remotely to turn their microphones to mute unless they wish to speak, and they should do so by raising their hand remotely. I can also remind members under Standing Order 13 that remote members attending hybrid meetings where quasi-judicial and regulatory matters are being considered will not be permitted to participate by audio only and must have their video and camera functions switched on at all times. First of all, apologies for absence. Laura.
Thank you, Convener. Apologies from Councillor Durno and Councillor Gall.
Thank you. Members, any declarations of interest or statements of transparency this morning? No? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 3 regarding building warrants. The committee is asked to note during the period 3rd of August to the 6th of September 2024, a total of 53 building warrants, 1 demolition warrant and 15 amendment to warrants have been approved with an estimated cost of £9,274,399. A copy of the approved warrants has been sent to every member. Is that noted? Noted. Thank you. Number 4, delegated decisions. Similarly, the committee is asked to note during the same period, 3rd of August to 6th September 2024, a total of 48 applications have been approved and 1 refused under the Planning Acts through the scheme of delegation to officers. Again, members have been provided with all of these. Again, is that noted? Noted. Thank you very much. Agenda item 5 refers to the minutes of our previous meeting, so they're submitted today for approval as a correct record. The meeting held on 13th of August 2024. Have any members got any comments or adjustments they consider necessary? If not, are the minutes approved? Agreed. Thank you. Right, thank you. We've got 3 principal agenda items today, 3 planning applications. Agenda item 6 relates to report 276/24, and this report deals with planning application number 24/00178/FULM, submitted on behalf of Ecocell Energy Storage Limited for the development of a battery energy storage system with a capacity of 49.9 megawatt, comprising storage containers, control building, transformers, fencing, CCTV, access landscaping and associated works on land 400 metres north of Bankhead, Arborlit by Arbroath. I'll ask Mr Taylor to commence the slides.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, members. As you've alluded to, this is an application, a major application for planning permission for a battery energy storage system with a capacity of 49.9 megawatts. Planning permission is sought for a period of 40 years, and the application site lies on land, agricultural land to the north of Bankhead, Arborlit by Arbroath. So on the left-hand side, we have some context for the site. The site is defined by the red line boundary. The site is located to the northwest of Arbroath, approximately 1.2 kilometres to the north of the public road which links Arbroath with Arborlit, and around about 60 metres west of the road which links northern part of Arbroath with Woodville Fuse. So the site would comprise a 2.7 hectare bunded compound which would contain the proposed battery storage development. The nearest residential receptors to the development are located at Lochaber. There are 3 dwellings in the Lochaber farm complex. That's the closest dwelling there is approximately 200 metres to the west of the site. The next closest property is to the south of the site at Bankhead. That property would be in the region of 350 metres south of the bunded compound. And as you can see on the right-hand side, there are numerous properties adjacent to the C51 around Denfield, Millfield, Rosebank, and they range in distance, but most are approximately 600 metres from the application site. So in terms of access, the main the main traffic impact would be during the construction process, which it is envisaged would take place over a 6-month period. During that time, it's understood that the peak construction activity would, I think, be 17 HGVs per day, which I think equates to, during a normal working day, just over 2 per hour. But in terms of the projected route of construction traffic, it's understood that it would come from the A92 in the south, turn north along Westway, turn west along Aberlet Road West, along the road to Aberlet before turning onto the unclassified road to the south of the site, and then joining up to the Lochaber Farm access track. And in terms of acceptability around traffic levels, that is a matter which is raised in representations as a concern. The Road Service has examined the proposal, the information provided, and considers impacts can be appropriately mitigated subject to a number of measures, which would include the installation of passing places along that section of the public road, subject to agreeing the route of construction traffic and identifying any other mitigation works that will be necessary, including the provision of suitable visibility displays. The other sort of background context it's worth noting at this point in terms of the geography of the surrounding area is the elevation of the site is approximately 60 metres AOD. We have higher land to the west of the site and to the northwest of the site. So we have Newton Hill, which I think has an elevation of 94 metres, and higher land around 75 metres extending to the north-northwest of the site. So the benefit of that is views of the development, visual impact of the development very much restricted from areas to the west, very little to no visibility from areas to the west. And in terms of areas to the east, it provides a landscape backcloth to development. Development will be seen against rising land in that location. Members are now obviously very familiar with this type of application. There is development plan support for all forms of renewable energy development, including energy storage proposals, and energy storage proposals help to balance electricity supply in the grid by taking and storing electricity during peak supply periods and then redischarging into the grid at periods when it is required. So strong support from development plan policy where impacts are localised and can be appropriately mitigated. So I'll draw members' attention firstly to the central image. This is a site plan. What we see here is the junction of the site to the unclassified public road to the south. The closest residential property, not particularly clear, but this is Bankhead. It's located in this location. So traffic would go north along the existing farm access track. Where the track turns to the west, a new section of track will be formed extending to the east and then to the north to lead to the compound. I'll move to the left-hand side of the slide now. Bit more detail of that compound. So we have a 10-metre wide, 2.5-metre high bunded compound, which in itself would provide some screening of development. Within the compound itself, the batteries will be located to the north. There'll be 40 batteries laid out to the north of the site with associated infrastructure adjacent. In the areas to the south, there'll be further electrical infrastructure, welfare facilities for staff and parking. The indication is that the compound itself, the bunded area, would be planted up, and in time that's likely to provide a reasonably significant mitigation of impacts from development. To the north, we have a SUDS, a surface water drainage facility, that would discharge water at a greenfield rate into the adjacent field drainage system. Now, the application has been amended during its life to reduce the size of the compound. The reason for that is while NPF4 policy is supportive of this type of development on prime quality land, it does try and ensure that the development occupies the minimum land necessary to accommodate the development. So the applicant has made amendments to reduce the size of the compound. The consequence is that the construction compound would be required to sit to the south of the site, but that would be a temporary use of land. That area would be restored following the completion of the development and returned to agricultural use. So this would result in the loss of prime quality land, but as members are aware, planning policy allows for the use of prime quality land in such circumstances, and steps have been taken to try and minimise the amount of that land that the development would use. Final aspect of this slide is again something members are very familiar with, the sort of appearance of battery storage units, very much of the appearance of shipping containers, just under 3 metres in height. As I say, they will be located north of the compound, and there's a cross section there just showing some of the infrastructure measuring up to around about 6 metres in height. And this is a Google Earth image, I think, which has been adapted to sort of give you more of a schematic of what the development would likely look like. So you can see the bunded compound which would surround the complex, the drainage area to the north, and I have some visualisations which I'll come to, which hopefully give you a slightly better understanding of the appearance of the development on completion, at the baseline position, and then around about 15 years following completion. This is the landscaping scheme, so this would have the combined effect of helping to screen the development in time, but it would also work as providing a biodiversity enhancement. It's currently cropped agricultural land, so limited biodiversity value. Native species would be planted on the bund, as well as areas to the north close to the sustainable drainage area. What we can see just on the left-hand side of this slide, the left-hand side of this slide is the closest residential property to the west at Lochaber. This is the property at 2 Lochaber Cottages. It is the closest to the development. There is a fairly extensive area of hedge planting along the east side of the Lochaber Farm complex, which limits views. The development will be visible from that property. It will be visible from area of its garden, but that property has a principal elevation facing away from the site, and at the distance involved, and having regard to the mitigation which exists and is proposed, impacts are not considered to be significant or unacceptable on that property. This slide shows a theoretical visibility of the development. So the red line site identified in the centre, the dotted lines represent a 1 kilometre buffer and a 2 kilometre buffer from the site, with the orangey coloured, peachy coloured area showing theoretical visibility of development. So we touched upon earlier Newton Hill to the west, which limits visibility to the west of the site and to an extent to the south of the site. And what we have here is largely impact of development in terms of impact on views and landscape for receptors in the area, largely contained to an area of 1 kilometre from the site and largely contained to areas to the north, to the east and to the southeast of the site. So you can see very limited visibility of the development from Arbroath, but some visibility of the development from areas along the C51 and along the core path, which is shown dashed blue at the bottom of the slide. Woodville Fuse itself, property looks towards the site around about 900 metres away. Property around Rosebank would have views of the site also, but around 600 metres away. And at that distance, and having regard to the mitigation proposed, again, impacts on residential receptors, both close to the site and more distance to the site, not considered to be unacceptable. So I have some photomontages here, and what I'll do, because obviously I'm not sure how clear, they're quite clear on the large screen, but for those looking online, I'll zoom into the proposed image in a subsequent slide just to try and give you a slightly better flavour of the view. But this top slide is taken from close to property at Lochaber, so it's on the field side of the hedge planting, which provides screening to that property, around about 200 metres from the development. So this is the existing view, so there is rising land to the rear. But on completion of the development, and around about 15 years following completion of the development, we have a bund area with trees on top. And I think the applicant has suggested at this period, 15 years in, the trees would be, I think, between 4 and 8 metres high. So largely mitigating the impact of the development gradually over time. The impact of that will just increase, obviously, as the planting matures. As I say, just a zoomed in version of that image. You will still see apparatus poking above the trees, but the impact of that obviously will lessen as time progresses. Moving to the south of the site, this image is taken around about 300 to 350 metres south of the site. It's taken from the core path, which is to the right of the image. You can't see it. What we're looking at here is the farm track, which runs along the east side of the site. So the fairly flat area of the site from this location, and the bottom slide shows when the planting is matured, 15 years in, impacts largely mitigated. And I'll zoom in just to show the development will be visible through that gap, but the most significant effects would largely be mitigated by the landscaping scheme proposed. And the final photomontage I have is taken from the southeast. So this is close to the C51, around the area of Denfield. So the baseline position is in the top slide. The development would be just in the foreground with Newton Hill rising in the background, so providing some backclothing. And then we go down, we can see that effectively the line of trees. Obviously, in reality, it will appear closer than these images suggest. And hopefully the next image shows it slightly more accurately in terms of what you're more likely to experience in the view. So again, you will see the development, but when in combination with the backclothing of land, the mitigation proposed by the applicant, there would be some impact, but it's not an impact that's considered to be unacceptable. And in terms of development plan policy, policy is supportive where impacts are localised and can be appropriately mitigated. And this is an instance where we consider both of those things apply. The impact is localised around about 1 kilometre from the site, and the mitigation proposed would suggest that it can be effectively mitigated in time. So the application has attracted some public interest. There are 3 representations, 2 raising objections, 1 neither in support nor objection, and we also have a comment from the Community Council, again not objecting to the application, but just raising the issue of cumulative issues in the surrounding area. So on the left-hand side, we have the proposed development. So the blue is intended to roughly or crudely represent the approximate position of the battery storage compound. And in terms of the cumulative position, we have operational and consented battery storage developments just to the north of Arbroath, which are around about 1.2 kilometres to the southeast. The applicant's assessment is that cumulative impacts would not be significant, and that conclusion is generally reasonable. More significantly, we have an application for a solar development and battery storage around 300 metres east of the site. Now, that application is under consideration and is likely to come before members in the future, but as it stands, that application is likely to be amended to reduce impacts on the closest residential property, and cumulative impacts associated with that can be considered in a subsequent decision at the appropriate time. But the submission suggests that development can coexist with the development proposed, but as I say, that is something we would have to consider when we make an assessment of that application, and members will be able to make a decision on that at the appropriate time. In terms of other public comments, we have a lot of speculation around about what might or might not happen in the future in the surrounding area, but obviously we can only consider what's in front of us and can't put any weight on speculation about what might or might not happen in the future. There are concerns raised about construction traffic, and I've touched upon the issues around about that in the presentation earlier. It's considered that there would be some impact from construction traffic during the 6-month construction period, but mitigation is proposed to minimise the impact of that traffic. The other matter that is raised is noise. We have a noise assessment completed that was based on noise measurements which are carried out at the site. It's been carried out by an appropriately qualified professional. It's been carried out to a methodology which has been agreed with our colleagues in environmental health. And the findings of that noise assessment suggest, again, impacts on amenities should not be unacceptable. And members will see at the end of the report there is a range of planning conditions, a number of planning conditions which mitigate amenity impacts relating to noise during the construction and operation of the development. Finally, so just to recap, development plan policy, as members are aware, is extremely supportive where impacts are localised and can be mitigated, and this is considered to be the case here. We consider impacts to be very much localised, and the information available suggests that this is a development where landscape and visual impacts particularly can be appropriately mitigated. Amenity impacts are controlled by the proposed planning conditions. There are conditions relating to noise, to regulate construction traffic, external lighting, vibration. There are a range of other planning conditions proposed which relate to site restoration, fire safety, to ensure that any contaminated water would be appropriately captured in the event of an emergency situation, and to ensure appropriate landscaping. This is a development which has no objections from technical consultees. There's strong support from the development plan. The proposal is considered to comply with the development plan, and on that basis, it's recommended for approval.
Thank you, Mr Taylor. First of all, do members present in the chamber or online have any questions for Mr Taylor? I'll go for, I got you held, Mr Councillor Durham, sorry, but I'll go for Councillor Beattie first.
Thanks, Convener. Mr Taylor, you mentioned cumulative impact. Can you explain how this is actually determined, and at what stage do we actually reach a threshold for cumulative impact? I know there's a lot of these developments, you know, planned and approved across Angus, and it would be good to get a flavour of that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll certainly do my best to do that. So I think what we have to consider, the main assessment requires us to consider existing and consented development, because that is a sort of a guarantee, if you like, or could be delivered. So in terms of the existing cumulative baseline, as I touched upon, existing battery storage in the area to the north of Arbroath, and what we have in front of us. So it's very technical, it's an assessment of cumulative impact, cumulative landscape and visual impact, but really the appropriate time to do that for the adjacent development is when that application is in front of us, when we'll have a fuller picture of what the baseline is at that time. At the moment, it's slightly speculative, so I haven't made any conclusions on cumulative impact associated with the proposed development because it's not really the appropriate time to do that. But the applicant has made that assessment and does suggest it could coexist with other development proposed in the area. Hopefully.
So I was really just looking for a general term, a general idea of, you know, where do we actually start to think we need to draw the line? Not just...
So again, that's slightly difficult to answer. I mean, we obviously have landscape capacity information, but I mean, obviously we have solar guidance which has landscape capacity limits, which we would obviously try and ensure that wasn't breached. But there isn't any specific guidance for battery storage. It is very much a case-by-case basis assessment. But what we've got to avoid doing is avoiding a significant adverse impact on landscape character. So you need to keep the landscape character at a place where you are not changing it to a point where that is an adverse and unacceptable impact. Sorry, it's a slightly difficult question to answer that one because it's really an assessment at the time the application is determined.
Mrs Patterson.
Just to update Councillor Beattie that we're in the process of undertaking a renewable energy master plan that's just been commissioned, and that will look at all the different developments proposed and consented across the area and take into account elements, as Mr Taylor suggested, around landscape impact, etc., that should give us a really good overview for moving into the next development plan and also a basis for future applications. But it will be some months before we have that prepared.
Thanks, Jill. Councillor Doran.
Thank you. My question somewhat relates to that as well, because I wanted to ask more about the questions around wildlife and the ecological appraisal that was done. So what are the expectations of what should be undertaken to assess impact on ecology for battery storage sites? And in this application, is that sufficient? Because I don't think that's really answered within the information put forward. So I want to know what the expectation is, if it's been matched here. And again, that would also relate to the cumulative impact of these sites. Are they only ever looked at one by one, or would it be then, if there is a future application that's done, will it look on the cumulative impact on the ecology of there being two sites close by, if that was to happen?
So the application is accompanied by a habitat sort of assessment. There's been a walkover survey and a desk survey of the site. So that will assess both the wildlife value, I suppose, of the site and that of the surrounding area. So obviously, if there was adjacent development, then that would be considered and picked up in any site-specific assessment. The site itself is of limited biodiversity value. It's an agricultural field, and the development plan expectation is that major developments will deliver biodiversity enhancement. So we have an assessment of the baseline position of the wildlife value of the site at present, and we have proposals to enhance it over time. Hopefully that helps a little.
Can I just have what a follow-up on that one related to that? Is there any ever, or is there an external kind of verification of these studies that are carried out by developers in the context of the energy sides of battery storage?
So in terms of external and scrutiny of these things, again, I hope this is answering your question, but developments which are more likely to have an impact would be subject to consultation with the nature conservation body, Nature Scot, and we obviously have biodiversity advice within our own council. So we obviously have a record of different developments which are happening. We have protected sites, local nature conservation sites, nationally designated sites. So every development that comes forward would have to have regard to these features. Yes, cumulative impact would be considered, but this is a relatively small-scale development. The site is of limited biodiversity value, and there aren't considered to be any significant cumulative issues which would affect wildlife in this general location. Obviously, fields in this area will sometimes be used by migratory birds, but this is a relatively small development. There is lots of agricultural land in the surrounding area, which would continue to be available for sort of foraging purposes.
Okay. Councillor Fotheringham.
Yes, thank you, Convener. Page 13 on the report, paragraph 8.30, the applicant has indicated that fire suppression systems would be provided within the battery energy storage system. I know that the the fire service attend the Scrutiny Audit Committee every quarter, and when they go to a fire of a full battery car, it's a different situation that they use. What's the planning condition going to be? And it's got that any untreated water, is it going to be water that's used to put out battery fire, or is it going to be foam or another liquid? Thank you.
And this is something possibly the applicant's agent can shed a bit more light on, but yes, so there's a range of methods. I suppose the battery systems, my understanding is that they have fire suppression equipment installed within them, and the reference really to water is an event where the fire brigade may have to arrive at a site and douse surrounding land sort of to prevent that becoming sort of ignited. Sorry, I don't know if that's the correct word. So really it's just to ensure that if there's any contamination, doesn't leave the site as captured, so it doesn't enter the water environment. But there's a planning condition, which is E, I think 3E, which requires a fire safety management plan, and that would list the various mechanisms they would use to ensure that the risk is dealt with and mitigation is provided. I mean, but obviously this is something that's largely regulated by health and safety legislation rather than planning legislation, and what we're trying to secure is that has been appropriately thought through as part of the planning process. But it's really other legislation which would govern that.
Yeah, thanks. I'm conscious that I think with these applications coming through, we always look for some form of condition for a fire and safety management plan. It's quite clear here, but maybe we can ask again. We do have speakers here on this one, so we can maybe ask for more detail if you wish it from them. Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. A kind of related question to others that have been asked. I mean, some time ago, the Planning Service very helpfully gave us statistics on the amount of prime agricultural land either with solar farms or approved, and from memory that was just under 1% when that was produced, and I suspect that number hasn't massively changed in the last year. I think for members it would be quite useful to have almost as a dashboard where we are now, because I think the concern would be, if we go on for several years like this, that number is going to go up, and there'll come a point in time where people are saying, well, people are concerned about food security, etc. When is the point when we say maybe enough is enough? I mean, clearly you're looking at it from the landscape point of view, and if there's a lot in one area, that would be perhaps undesirable, but almost on the macro scale for Angus, what is reasonable and what's not. I think it'd be useful just to always have if you like, a check, where are we in that bigger scale, so that we kind of know where we are. I accept we're probably not at that point yet, but it would be useful to have that, I think, going forward.
Thanks, Councillor Duff. I think it also would actually substantiate what Councillor Beattie brought about cumulative impact and that, so it would be useful to have that information, and also doing that, I think, would perhaps placate public fears or concept about how large this is becoming on prime agricultural land. Have we got any other questions for Mr Taylor? No? Okay, thanks very much. Well, we do actually have... Oh, is there somebody?
Can I ask a question?
No, I'm sorry, Mr Whitton, you're just here to speak in your case as objector. You can't ask questions of council officers. I'll come to you shortly. I'll come to you shortly. We do have, as just heard, one objector to speak today, but in fact, I'm going to come to you now, Mr Whitton, actually, but if you just bear with me a second, just to go through the formalities. Under Standing Order 12 of Angus Council, applicants, supporters and objectors are given the opportunity to address any points which they wish this committee to take into account in coming to its decision. Speakers will be given 5 minutes only, and I'd remind speakers that members of this committee have already been provided with the opportunity to read all submissions and thus may already be familiar with most of the points that may be raised by speakers. So we have one objector, and they also have the agent and the applicant's agent who will follow up on that afterwards. So, Mr Whitton, you have 5 minutes if you'd like to make a start, and I will give you a minute's notice to wrap up.
Okay, thank you. I shall just head straight into it then. As a spokesperson for Rosebank, my name is Glenn Whitton, and I was asked to represent Rosebank, which is 4 properties face the Battery Bank 600 metres away. Also want to bring to Council's attention that there's an additional 2 houses, Glen Brody and Park End Farm, which have not been quoted in any report at all. I investigated this first to find out what obviously the situation was, and we were nominated as a visual receptor being 600 metres straight across from the site. Further investigation proved Rosebank was not processed as a receptor, and the 2 additional houses I mentioned weren't either. The 6 properties are equivalent to 75% of the closest receptors, which have been omitted by the applicant, visual and noise surveys. If we can take your attention to 8.16 of the applicant's assessment document, it says impacts on property to the north and the east would not be unacceptable. And it goes on to say the properties around Denfield and back to the east between 600 metres and 800 metres from the Battery Bank compound.
Mr Whitten, can I just interrupt you for a second? Is it possible that you can, we're having difficulty hearing you in the chamber. We are getting it most of all, but it's a little bit more volume from you if possible.
I'll see if actually, okay, can you hear me now?
Much better, thanks very much.
Okay, I'll hold the microphone across my face then. Yeah, the impacts on property north and east would not be unacceptable. Now, there has been no surveys carried out by any professional body, certainly not in the public domain, and one wonders how the council can make possibly make a decision on impacts when there is no assessments made professionally. It seems like somebody's had a drive-by and had a look and says, "Oh yeah, that'll be fine." There is nothing in the public domain to back that up. No approved supporting documents. I'll go on to the visual impact, the topography of the site, which all slopes down towards the view from Rosebank, which will put all the containers and equipment in clear view as the 2.5 metre bund facing Rosebank is going on land at 58 metres above sea level. And the equipment is going on land 60 metres. So it basically takes away the bund right away. I know you're going to be growing, there's going to be things put on there, but at 3 and 5 metres, the bund is actually going to do very little screening. And it'll need to be at least 7 metres to avoid full view at Rosebank. The 4.5 metre perimeter soundproofing fence recommended will actually cause a darkening effect in the winter months. From your quote, the question I was going to ask was that you've now put in 8 metre high. Well, due to the topography, that takes it up to about, I've checked on 3 apps, it'll take it up between 69 and 71 metres above the height. The site is actually our horizon, and we will lose sunlight in the winter months. I've already done the surveys on this for the solar arrays. We will lose 2 hours of sunlight through November, December, January and February, which hasn't been tested, hasn't been checked, and it is obviously negative amenity to the properties involved. 75% of the closest receptors taken out, Bankhead and the ones at Lochaber themselves. It's 75% of the properties. To that, this can only lead to the conclusion that the applicant has an affiliation with incompetence because it's not in the report at all. And it seems that with the council making this decision on the impacts, they've actually done the survey for the applicant. Because it's the council that's deemed it not unacceptable, not the client. So I'm a bit confused in that area as well. However, going on to that, we will lose the sunlight. In tendering my objection, I actually gave the Battery people a chance to redeem themselves and take out their inaccuracies. That has just been left the same. There's nothing been changed on that, and we feel at Rosebank that we haven't been heard, and certainly we've been totally ignored. And Denfield Road, including Rosebank and Blairbank, has just disappeared. It's more along the lines of David Copperfield making the Statue of Liberty disappear. And I'll rest my case there because I don't.
Sorry, Mr. Whitten, just to let you know, I know I'll give you another minute if you don't mind. You've kind of gone past it, but I know we couldn't hear the first part very well. We did get it, but I'll give you another minute just to wrap up, okay?
Okay, yeah, sure, thank you. Just touching on the visual and noise receptors, I can hear tractors at Loch Arbor now and get 40 decibels in my bedroom. And you're saying that there's going to be something like 40 to 50 noise pollution equipment producing 85 decibels. That's going to come straight into my bedroom as well, regardless of any vegetation that's growing. So we do have an issue with noise and vision, and it seems like I say 75% of the receptors have simply been removed and ignored.
Thank you very much, Mr. Whitten, for your comments. If you just stay online at the moment, I will ask if any members have any questions for you based on your contribution this morning.
Okay,
do members have any questions for Mr. Whitten at this stage? No questions in the room or online, Mr. Whitten. So thanks very much for your representation. You're free to go now if you wish. We'll move on to we have the applicants and the applicants' agents here. Maria Frank, Jamie Glover. If you'd like to come and take a seat here down at the end, position yourself there. And again, for yourselves, we'll give you 5 minutes to make a representation, and then you'll be open to questions from committee. So I'll let you kick off. Just if you press the microphone to actually, so we can hear what you're saying, and everybody online can hear you as well. Okay.
Thank you. Good morning, convener. Good morning, convener, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present on behalf of EcoCell Energy Storage Limited regarding the proposed battery energy storage system at Loch Arbor Farm. I'm joined by Jamie Glover, a director of EcoCell, and we're happy to answer any questions after this presentation. We recognise that your key responsibility is to protect the well-being of the community while making balanced, informed decisions that support progress. EcoCell Energy shares that commitment. That's why we've designed the project with the community at the forefront of every decision. The location was carefully selected to minimise any disruption to residents. In response to feedback from the community, we made adjustments to the layout of the battery containers to further minimise potential disruption. The nearest home is more than 200 metres away, and we've incorporated a 10-metre wide planting buffer to not only provide visual screening, but also absorb noise and boost biodiversity. Our goal is to ensure that this development fits seamlessly into the landscape while delivering significant benefits. When it comes to safety, we recognise the concern from members. We've adopted best practices and left nothing to chance. A fire safety management plan will be secured as a planning condition and will guarantee the highest safety standards. The plan includes state-of-the-art fire detection and suppression systems, and it will be rigorously monitored and enforced throughout the lifetime of the project. We want to assure both the committee and the community that safety is and will remain a top priority. Battery energy storage systems are no longer just an innovative technology. They're a necessity. As Scotland transitions to a cleaner, renewable energy system, the intermittent nature of wind and solar power needs to be managed effectively. This facility will store surplus renewable energy and release it during periods of high demand, contributing to grid stability and reducing reliance on fossil fuels. As you've heard, the proposal aligns with both national and local planning policies. Policy 11 of NPF4 actively supports developments that contribute to a low-carbon economy. Similarly, the Angus Local Development Plan actively encourages energy storage infrastructure. By granting permission, you'll be supporting Scotland's ambitious carbon reduction targets and helping to secure long-term energy security for the region. We've taken great care to minimise environmental impact. The facility will occupy only 2.7 hectares of the 5.7 hectare site, and technical assessments confirm minimal impact on landscape, noise levels and ecology. After 40 years, the land will be fully restored to agricultural use, with a bond secured to ensure that this commitment is fulfilled. This guarantees that the temporary use of the land will have no lasting impact on the local agricultural productivity. The project will also bring tangible economic benefits to the local area. During construction, approximately 35 full-time equivalent jobs will be created, and the local supply chain will benefit from this activity. Beyond construction, the project positions the region as a leader in renewable energy, contributing to the long-term sustainability and economic resilience. We have taken every step to minimise the impact on residents. With the nearest homes over 200 metres away and the landscape buffer with acoustic measures in place, we are confident that there will be no significant noise or visual disruption. The technical and environmental assessments demonstrate that this project will integrate seamlessly into the rural landscape. In conclusion, this project represents a critical part of Scotland's future energy infrastructure. It will help stabilise the national grid, contribute to climate change goals, create jobs and provide long-term benefits to the local economy, all with minimal impact on residents and the environment. By granting planning permission today, you'll be supporting both the local community and Scotland's broader climate and energy goals. We respectfully ask the committee to approve this forward-thinking development, and thank you for your time, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms Frank. We'll just move straight to that point. We'll start off with Councillor Fotheringham with the question first.
Thank you, Convener. I raised this previously. Can you tell me how the fire suppression system will be monitored? Please, thank you.
Yes, the plan is to have a detection system in place, a sort of a three-tier system. So it starts off with sort of battery management system itself, internal to the battery containers, which monitors essentially the heat emitted from the battery systems. That's the sort of first part of the fire safety procedures. If there's any sort of rise in temperature within the containers, that triggers an alert off to the control system, and they immediately react to that. There's also then a second tier, which is a gas detection system in place. Again, following the first trigger of the battery management system. So the second tier is gas detection, and then after that as well, in the event of an actual fire, there's fire suppression activities as well that would take place. But all these will be set out in a full fire safety management plan, which will be, again, consulted with the National Fire Chiefs Council and the Scottish Fire Service as well.
Thank you, Councillor Fotheringham. Councillor Melville.
Yes, thank you, Convener. In terms just of management, my colleague Councillor Durno, who is not here today, raised this point in a previous meeting, and it's in respect of alarms. So in another application elsewhere, we've been told that there's an alarm going off consistently through the night. And my question to you is, and it's actually alluded to in the objection, that these sites, as we know, are not staffed 24/7. So if there was to be, say, a loud noise going off through the night, do you have someone who can go and sort that out? And if so, what's the kind of time scale for that you're looking at?
Sorry, hi. So basically the sites are monitored, maybe answered yourself question as well, through a SCADA system. And through that SCADA system, it's got full monitoring of the site, what the batteries are doing, how they're doing, etc. And that includes any kind of security concerns. That sounds, from what you're saying, like a security alarm. When the operation and maintenance contracts are put in place, there's usually a 24-hour response is put in there. Again, this site's early days. We're not, we're not even at the stage of build or thinking about that yet. So, but when these are put in place, there's usually a 24-hour system put in place whereas someone has to get to site and either reset some electrics, look at an alarm, etc., etc. So that's all there. You'd have to speak to those guys. But generally, when you look at, because we do, various different kind of renewable energy projects, that's generally what it is, and we have to respond within a 24-hour period. An alarm going off constantly is a massive nuisance. So no, we wouldn't allow that at all, and that would be down to the contractor.
Mr. Clever, just as a supplementary to that one, I think I asked something in the previous one as well. So I take it you've got, or your business has got, experience of setting up an operation like this before. So you've already done it in a previous. It's not just this isn't the first one.
Not battery storage, no. We've got experience in setting up kind of wind turbine developments as well. So we're generally a wind turbine company. We got involved in battery storage probably 2 and a bit years ago. So yes, but we've done, it's a very similar type development in terms of setup and the SCADA systems and the CMS systems, etc., etc. Okay,
and the reason I'm just asking about that is because it's just to follow up with what Councillor Melville said. What we've had before of national companies coming, being on alarm monitoring and things like this, set in Glasgow, but we don't want to wait people for 2 hours to come from Glasgow if there's a loud alarm going off. So I always recommend to businesses like that to have more local suppliers to actually do their alarm and monitoring.
Yeah, sorry, I'll basically mirror what you're saying there. So basically, the way, again, I can only talk for EcoCell, the way EcoCell works is there is a 24-hour, 7 days a week system in place for all our sites that we work with that's got that contract enabled. We've got like availability, commitments and things as well with people, so we have to do that kind of thing. But it's not from every point of view.
Yes, response time I'm really referring to here, the quick response time. Are there any other questions? I'm sorry. Oh, Councillor Brays, morning to you. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning and thanks, convener. Yes, I did have a question for the applicant and or the agent. You told us about your careful site selection for this project in terms of the impacts it might have on the community surrounding it, etc., etc. But I'm wondering, what constraints did you face when looking for a site to locate this plant in terms of practicalities for supplying the grid, etc., etc. So I'm wanting to know a wee bit about the constraints that you faced regarding grid connections and where the power was going, power lines, etc. Because presumably not every acre of land in the whole of Scotland is suitable practically for siting battery storage. Thanks.
Hi there. So yeah, basically there are massive constraints. The first thing that you really need is you need to have a grid connection, and you also need to have a landowner that's interested. That's the first thing. Then what we have to do is look at it, and what we then do as a company is we then send it on to our professional planning consultants, representatives, and they basically tell me, yep, this looks like it would be reasonable from a planning perspective, from a land and visual impact perspective, from a noise perspective, because they know technically what we are trying to achieve on that site. So the first protocol is, are we close enough to the grid connection? Is there grid available? Next protocol is the landowner actually interested in doing what he's doing? And then we have to look at is this going to be reasonable from a planning perspective to do? We do throw out numerous sites based on all of these constraints that you talked about. So yeah, so we do have to be very careful. Basically, from the point of view is from planning, and the point of view is even from a company, from a business point of view, is the time you do your grid connection and your planning application, there's a large cost associated to doing that. So we have to be careful from that point of view as well, so that we're actually carefully selecting the site to make sure we're doing exactly the right thing. And we will go through the full planning process from start to finish. We've been around EcoCell for quite a long time. We've done several developments. Again, we're wind turbine guys, so we have to be even more careful with the wind turbines. But we are very, very careful how we select it from every point of view, and our interest is to make sure that we're doing everything we can for local community to try and get best chance of success for the site.
Thanks for that.
Thanks, Councillor Brays. Any other questions? Oh, thanks very much, Ms Frank and Mr Glover. You can take your seats again. Thanks very much. It's now going to move to elected members' comments here. I've just asked Ms Taylor to put the slide back up on there showing the location, just for everybody's benefit, if and as and when you comment. Do members have any comments? Councillor Melville first.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, I do think that we need this technology. I've said that previously for these kind of applications, and I'll say it again. We need this technology if we're going to reach net zero. That is the kind of allowances that are made in NPF 4, which we are working from here. And crucially, we need it in enough time to be able to prevent significant climate catastrophe. I appreciate a lot of the points raised in the objection, and I thank Mr Whitton for speaking to us today, but I do agree that the impacts are not unacceptable, and I will be supporting the application. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Melville. I saw Councillor Beattie.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Melville. I will also be supporting this application today. It is absolutely the kind of technology we need. We can make contributions to net zero in different ways in different parts of Scotland. Uplands can make contributions by peatland restoration. We don't have a huge amount of that down here, but what we can do is battery storage. Now, we have to take into consideration the cumulative impact, and I'm really glad that our officers are working on that, so I'm really pleased to see that. The other thing as well, as committee members will know, I often raise the point about fire and the potential for discharge of toxic chemicals into our watercourses, and I'm really glad to see the design of this application with the bund and with the drainage being limited by a valve that would prevent any water being, or any toxic water being discharged into the watercourses. So this actually looks like a pretty good application from my point of view.
Thanks, Councillor Beattie. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, colleagues. For most of what my colleagues have already said, I total agreement. But you would always listen to the objective. Mr Whitton spoke very eloquently on how he felt. And I listened to everything he said and looked in here for conditions, etc., thinking about the impacts, thinking about the nearest home. The nearest home is 200 metres. So for all the reasons my colleagues have said, and some of my own here, I really do feel that this is the way to go. And on this occasion, and we only take one at a time. I'm only listening to today. It's nothing about any other application for me, but I am in agreement with it and would support it wholeheartedly.
Thanks, Councillor Clark. Councillor Brays.
Yes, well, like others have said, I am supportive of them, and for the reasons that they've stated. But I would also add that when it comes to cumulative impact, I think we've got to remember that we have to build the storage in certain locations that are practical to develop. And cumulative impact of all the requirements for bringing us to net zero, there's going to be a whole lot of upheaval around settlements where the people live. You know, the consumers of that power live. You can't do it without that upheaval. When it comes to the use of prime agricultural land, we're faced with a similar challenge. You've got to build these storages near to where there's a grid connection. If you build them further away from that, you're going to have to dig up agricultural land or string power cables across it to get to the grid connection. There's no easy wins here. I hate to use the term that you can't make an omelette without breaking eggs, but that's pretty much where we are. If we're serious about this climate emergency, this is the sort of thing we have to do. The other wee point, which is not really relevant to this application, I suppose, is the economics. The fact of the matter is that food has become, at Farmgate, so cheap compared to everything else and fallen so far behind inflation for at least 50 years that the fact of the matter is that renewable energy production provides massively greater income than food production does now. Food production is more than a par, really, with what it costs to rent Netflix or a mobile phone.
Okay, Councillor Brace, thanks very much. I was going to say, from this side of the room, Councillor Dorden.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make a note around community consultation regarding these applications, and it was good to see that the applicant has carried out 2 public events as well as a website, and also that it's really important that any developer does this consultation, but it's also really important that communities do engage with this consultation as well. It was noted that there were some changes made following consultation, so they do have and can have impact on developments. As these sites are situated near communities, it's really important that there's a conversation between the 2 of them in any application. So I just wanted to mention that in the context of this application.
Thanks, Councillor Dorden. Are there any other comments? No? Okay, I will sum up then on behalf of the committee. The site here is located out with the development boundary and is not allocated or otherwise identified for development in the Angus Local Development Plan, although NPF 4 adopted in February 2023 prevails in this case. NPF 4 Policy 1, 2, 11 are all appropriate in here, and development plan and national policies provide strong support for proposals such as this that provide for the generation of renewable energy, including energy storage. In this case, the technology would appear to have potential to operate efficiently, and available evidence suggests that environmental impacts can be satisfactorily addressed. The proposal would give rise to impacts on the landscape and visual amenity of the area, however, and there would be an increase in traffic on minor roads around the site, primarily during the construction period. But we can see in our papers the documents that have been provided by the applicant, and as Councillor Johns just said, the consultation they have significantly reacted to on that as well. So this has been a landscape and visual appraisal submitted, and council officers have had an opportunity to address this and respond on that. So adverse landscape and visual impacts would be localised, and we've heard that new planting is proposed to provide mitigation. The proposal is generally consistent with relevant ALDP and NPF 4 policies, and it doesn't appear to me that any issues have been identified by consultation bodies that cannot be addressed by the planning conditions in the report. The issues raised by third parties and the Community Council have been considered, but supporting information and consultation responses indicate that, subject to appropriate mitigation and planning conditions, the development should not give rise to unacceptable impacts. So as the proposal complies with development plan policy and there are no material considerations that justify a refusal of planning permission, I'm going to move to approve the application subject to the conditions stated in the report, and seconded with Councillor Melville. Are there any amendments? No. Okay, thanks very much. Planning application number 24/00178/FULM is hereby approved subject to the conditions stated in the report. Thank you very much, everyone, for their attendance, and also for Mr. Whitten online as well. You don't have to stay for the rest of the meeting. You're more than welcome to if you wish. We'll move on to agenda item 7, which relates to report 277/24. This report deals with planning application number 24/00352/full for the change of use of land to form an extension to an existing caravan park for the siting of 25 additional caravans and additional landscaping at the Red Lion Caravan Park in Dundee Road and Arbroath. And I think, Mr. Taylor, again, it's back to you.
Thank you, Convener. So as you've alluded to, item 7 is an application for full planning permission relating to the Red Line Caravan Park on Dundee Road, Arbroath. The application seeks to change the use of land to form an extension to the caravan park, which would allow for the formation of 25 additional caravan pitches and associated landscaping. So firstly, draw members' attention to the left-hand part of the screen. This is the proposals map for Arbroath, and it gives us some context for the site. So the application site is broadly in the position shown by the blue arrow in the bottom left of the slide. The Red Line Caravan Park occupies much of the white land, which is shown by the approximate position of my cursor. By way of context, we have the A92 and the main railway line, East Coast Railway line, to the immediate south of the site. We have the Westway Retail Park to the west of the site in the darker shade of blue. We have Hospital Field House located around about 300 metres to the north of the site. Now that area is protected by local development plan policy, recognising that that is a Category A listed building with a very important setting. So the area shaded blue extends beyond the curtilage of Hospital Field House, trying to ensure that any development in that general location protects the character, setting and appearance of Hospital Field and its grounds. The application site itself, as you'll see from the right-hand side with the extract in the centre, is not within that designation, but the considerations identified by A14 are relevant in this case. And in that regard, the application has been subject to consultation with HES, who has looked at the information submitted and has indicated it has no comments to make on the application. It has not identified any concerns in relation to impacts on Hospital Field House and the setting of Hospital Field House. Other context that's worthy of pointing out is the nearest residential property to the site is Waslap Avenue, which is shown roughly in the position of my cursor. The closest property is number 30. I think that the house itself is around about 37 metres from the edge of the application site, but its garden ground extends adjacent to the site. We'll look at impacts on Hospital Field House and impacts on the residential amenity of the nearest property as we go through the slides. But before I do that, I'll just give you a little flavour of the development plan context. So Angus Local Development Plan policy provides a supportive framework for tourism developments. It directs tourism developments to locations within settlement boundaries where identified impacts can be appropriately mitigated. We have a strategy for Arbroath, a planning development strategy for Arbroath, which seeks to develop tourism facilities and accommodation with particular emphasis on development along the seafront. We have MPF4, which encourages sustainable tourism development, and in that regard, this is a location which has good access to existing facilities within the existing caravan park. It has good access to the services and facilities in Arbroath, public transport, tourism facilities at the seafront, and has the potential to support the town economically. So there is a locational justification for an extension to the existing caravan park in this general location, subject to appropriate impacts being addressed. And finally, in the top corner, sorry, this slide has quite a lot on it. In the top corner, we have a drone image, which just gives a wee bit of context. We can see the existing caravan park extending from the east to the west, and the approximate position of the site is identified by the red line at the top here. So the application site is identified in red, and this just gives us a bit more context of the existing caravan park. It is a holiday caravan park, used for holiday purposes only. Extends from, I think this is the West Common in the east of the site, all the way to the Westway to the west of the site. Application site will be accessed via the existing site, travelling or using a route from the southwest. Oh, excuse me. And the main access to the caravan park will be utilised, which connects to Dundee Road to the south. In terms of the layout, so we can see the access to the site coming in from the southwest. Caravans arranged in a linear fashion. Each caravan would have a car parking space. There is an existing play park within this area that will be retained, and the addition of caravan parks close to that play park would introduce surveillance of that children's play area. Now, this is an application which has attracted some public interest, primarily from houses that live on Warslap Avenue and also from a household at Hospital Field. But Warslap Avenue is directly adjacent to the sort of north-northeast corner of the site. And during the life of the application, in order to try and address the concerns raised by third parties, the applicant has deleted caravans from the easterly extent of the site, and they have proposed to introduce a landscape buffer in that location. That landscape buffer would be around about 20 metres wide, and as a consequence of the amendment, the closest caravan to the closest house is 30 Warslap Avenue. That distance between the caravan and the house itself would be in the region of 55 metres, and the nearest caravan would be in the region of 26 metres from its garden. And as I say, as we go through the slides, I'll try and touch upon impacts on that property. But what this slide shows is the landscape strategy. So there would be new planting formed along the north boundary of the site, the northwest boundary, a sort of landscape buffer to the east, which would include over 60 heavy standard trees, which are each of the trees identified by the circles you can see. So that would include heavy standard trees in the location closest to the neighbouring property. So the application proposes 25 new caravan pitches, and the applicant has given us an indication of the type of caravan unit we would expect to see. So this unit, as shown here, is around about 3.4 metres in height. So there wouldn't be particularly high structures located within the pitches. I think this slide is particularly useful in terms of the comments made and representations. What we have at the top is a cross-section of the proposed site relative to the existing site. So we can see the existing leisure centre building shown on the right-hand side of the slide. We can see that the level to the right of that is much lower. So most of the caravans within this site are at a lower level than the land proposed in the application. It is elevated, but there is development at this sort of level in the surrounding area. And what you can see from this slide is the height of the ridge of the proposed caravans will be comparable to the height of the ridge of the leisure centre building. Moving down to the lower part of the slide, the section here, the applicant has also shown us here that they intend to drop the levels of land within the site slightly, just to allow those caravans to sit down. And that is important both in terms of reducing the townscape impact at the height that the caravans will be in views from the south and southwest, but also in views from Hospital Field, it will reduce the impact of caravans in views from that general location. So again, another drone image just gives probably a slightly better context than an aerial photograph would. So we can see the existing site, caravans at a lower level than the application site. We have the accesses into the site in this general location. We have the leisure centre building. The application site itself, where the caravans will be located, identified by the red dashed line. The buffer standoff area will be located in this general location between 20 and 25 metres in width. The closest residential property is 30 Warslap Avenue, which is the property we see in this general location. That would be, as I've suggested, around about 55 metres from the nearest caravan. But you can see that there is development at a similar elevation in this part of Arbroath. In this view, the site itself is at a similar elevation to development immediately adjacent to it to the north. It will be higher than most of the land serving caravans within the existing site, but landscape and visual impacts, townscape impacts, not particularly significant, having regard to the levels information submitted, having regard to the height of the existing buildings within the wider caravan site. This is taken from the other direction, so from the sort of seafront area looking to the sort of west. So we have the site, again, shown red. We have the nearest residential property shown by this blue arrow. So this is has a fairly extensive garden ground. It also has an area extending further to the south adjacent to that site, but there is some planting that exists within its garden which would provide a sort of amenity buffer in terms of an immediate impact, and obviously the applicant proposes steps to increase the level of screening over time as a consequence of their landscaping scheme to the east of the site. This area of woodland to the top right of the slide, that is the policies of Hospital Field House. So the house itself is around about 300 metres from the application site. We have a wooded curtilage which really sort of contains any views to and from Hospital Field, but obviously there would be more chance of views when the trees are not in leaf, and we have a slide which sort of tries to show that in subsequent. We can see that the agricultural land immediately adjacent to the site also provides some spacing between the policies of Hospital Field and the site itself, and that distance is approximately 150 to 160 metres. So the bottom image, these are slides provided by the applicant. The bottom image is taken from within the policies of Hospitalfield. So on the left-hand side, we can see the existing housing development, and it's quite tricky to see, but you can perhaps just see some ridges poking up, and that's what's given as an impression of the likely appearance of the caravans. When you're the other side of the trees into the field, this is the view, or the projected view that the applicant has provided. We can see in this image, we can see the height of the existing leisure centre building, and you can just see the small projections representing the height of the caravans. So they're not significantly projecting above the boundary wall, and not significantly different in terms of the height to the adjacent leisure centre building. So in terms of impacts on Hospitalfield House, as I've suggested, we have carried out a consultation with Historic Environment Scotland. We've had regard to the information submitted by the applicant, the spacing standards between the site and the Hospitalfield policies. Impacts not considered to be particularly significant on Hospitalfield House. Moving on to amenity impacts, just to try and give you a bit more information about that. This is an image which is provided in the third-party comments received. So this is, I believe, 30 Waslop Avenue. So you can see it is a house with a fairly extensive curtilage. You can see it has some planting on its west side, but I also understand its garden area actually extends further beyond this image into this area. But this is the location here I'm showing with my cursor where the applicant would install a landscape buffer between vans. And as I've suggested, the distance between the property itself and then his caravan will be in the region of 55 metres. Clearly, the caravans will be visible from that property and other residential property within that street. But there is a reasonable separation distance, and this is a location within a development boundary where there are other developments and there will be neighbouring activities that will have the potential to impact on amenity. But in that regard, it's understood that the site has a 24-hour site presence, management presence, that could potentially deal with any amenity issues should they arise. So just in summary then, the development plan provides a very supportive policy framework for tourism developments, directs into development boundaries, and seeks to see this type of development and this type of location within Arbroath. We are satisfied that landscape and visual impacts or townscape impacts would not be particularly significant. The view of caravans would increase from some locations towards the seafront, from some locations to the west, but that in itself isn't. It's whether impacts are unacceptable. In this case, there are other developments at a similar elevation. Caravans form a part of the character of this part of Arbroath, and that is not an impact we consider to be particularly significant, and not an impact certainly we consider to be unacceptable. This is an application which has no objections to technical consultees. Amendments have been made by the applicant to try and address the concerns raised by neighbours. So we think the development strikes a reasonable balance between safeguarding the amenity of those that live in the surrounding area, but also helping to deliver the tourism development, the benefits that the proposal is anticipated to deliver. Conditions are proposed in relation to archaeology, landscaping, to ensure that the caravans are only used for holiday purposes, and limiting the number and location of pitches in the application site itself. The application, again, considered to comply with development plan policy. There are no material considerations in the opinion of officers that justify refusal of planning permission, and on that basis the application is recommended for approval.
Thanks, Mr Taylor. Have members any questions on this one for Mr Taylor? Nobody in the room? Oh, Councillor Dorn.
Thanks. I just wanted to know, obviously there's two things I think that have been raised in some of the objections to this one, which relate to the ecological survey and also the disruption of the land as it's being lowered to fit the caravans in. What is your assessment of that impact on the kind of drainage assessment that they've done and the ecological impact, because they've given themselves kind of a score? Does that new version impact on that?
Sorry, thank you for your question, Councillor Durham. So the ecological value of the site is likely to be relatively limited. You can see from the image, it's a grassed area. There are some trees within it. They would be retained with additional planting. So there's likely to be a fairly significant increase in the biodiversity value of the site. There has been an ecological survey carried out that does not identify any protected species or sites that will be affected by the development. The information available to us suggests that overall there will be an enhancement of the biodiversity value of the site, and in that regard, the proposal meets the policy tests that are in the local development plan, in the opinion of officers.
Thanks, Councillor Doran. Any other questions? Councillor Beattie.
Thanks, Convener. Mr Taylor, can we have a look at the landscaping image again, please? Okay, so on the screen, the text is tiny, but I'm having a look at it here. And I noticed that there's going to be a boundary hedge introduced. That's correct, is it? Yeah. And that hedge is going to be largely made up of hawthorn and holly and some other very spiny looking plants. This is to basically secure that area, is that correct?
It would have two benefits. It would increase the biodiversity value of the site, but it would also help the hedge in combination with the trees, and we're talking about heavy standard trees as shown on this. That would help to lessen the sort of impacts when looking from the north from Hospital Field. So it would have two benefits.
Can I just come in on that, Ms Taylor, again, because we discussed this, but heavy standard trees, can you just give me a bit more information what heavy standard trees mean compared with saplings or whatever being planted?
I mean, the planting schedule actually identifies a projected height of the trees when planted, so if that's helpful. I mean, I think we're talking about around 61 heavy standard trees as shown on the slide, and I think the smallest tree would be 3 metres when planted, up to, but that's very much just one tree, but in general terms, the trees at the height when planted would be between 4 and 6 metres in height. Now, that's probably slightly misleading because obviously they won't have much spread at that stage, but the trees are, I suppose, as far on as we can reasonably expect in this type of situation.
Thanks for that. That clarifies it from my point of view. Other questions in the room? No, none online. In that case, we have no speakers this morning, so we'll move straight to comments. Anyone? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr Taylor. You've answered all sorts of questions for me today. I do have experience with caravan parks. I've said this before because I did run a couple in my career. And for me, a well-run caravan park and a well-situated caravan park is paramount to Scotland's tourism. We need it because it involves giving people from all sorts of background the chance to come on a holiday that they may not be able to afford otherwise. And this in Arbroath has been a famous one for many years. And I think what's planned here does suit me well. I've even sighted caravans in my time, so in my past time. I'd really like to support this. I think they're doing well. They can always do better, and I think that's in your conditions there when you speak about that we'll not be having people staying there forever, right through the year. That's a great thing because it's meant to be a holiday park. There are other places where people can stay right throughout the year. So for that point of view, not only do I make the comment, Chair, I would like to move this. I'm really happy with it, content. So I would agree with the fact that we are actually going to approve this. Thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Duff?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Yes, I'd agree with Councillor Clark. I mean, this is I would say, a modest development to a well-established caravan park. Tourism is obviously an important part of the Arbroath economy, and it's recommended for approval by officers, and I'm happy to support the application.
Thank you. Is that all comments? Okay, again, just sum up on this one. I think you've made it quite eloquently already, but the development plan strategy for Arbroath seeks to develop tourism facilities and accommodation, and it's particularly along the seafront. The policy offers support for proposals for new or improved tourist accommodation on sites within development boundaries, subject to development being of appropriate scale and nature and in keeping with the townscape and pattern of development. In this case, I believe the proposal seeks a relatively modest extension, as you say, Councillor Duff, to the existing caravan park, and consultees have identified no significant issues which cannot be addressed by planning conditions, and we've already heard that the impact on the sitting of Hospital Field House is not significant. The application has attracted objection, primarily from property on Warslip Avenue, as we've heard, but the proposal has been amended to reduce the number of caravan pitches proposed and provide a landscape buffer between the nearest housing on Warslip Avenue to the north and the new caravan pitches. The new caravans themselves primarily will be only visible from what looks like first floor of properties closest to the park, and they already, if you see the pictures, already have a view of caravans from the first floor as it is just now. So I think impacts on the amenity of that property and others are considered to be acceptable. So, Councillor Clark has already said she would move the proposal, and can I have a seconder then? Councillor Duff. And are there any amendments? No. Thank you very much, everyone. In that case, planning application number 24/00352 is hereby approved, subject to conditions stated. At this point, can I just ask members, do they wish a 5 or 10 minute recess? We'll go for a 10-minute recess then, please, for a convenient break.
Can you stop the live stream, please?
Well, welcome back, everyone. The last item on the agenda today, agenda item 8, relates to report 278 of week 24, dealing with planning application 24 of week 00254, and it's a planning permission in principle by AJ Liburn Limited for the erection of 9 dwelling houses, including redevelopment of a brownfield site and ancillary works on land to the west of Bridgend Farmhouse, Ruthven. And Ms Porter is to present the slides on this one. Seth.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, everyone. So, item 8 today deals with a planning permission in principle application for 9 dwellings and ancillary works. So this first slide here gives you an idea of the wider landscape context for the site, where Ruthven is indicated by this blue dot on the top left-hand side of the screen here. And as you can see, we've got Alyth just a short distance, about 4 kilometres to the west, and you've got Kirriemuir to the north-east, and that's roughly about 10 kilometres away from Ruthven. The larger image on the slide here shows the development boundary for Ruthven, where the development boundary is indicated by the thick black line. And the application site is in the southwest extent of the development boundary, roughly this area here, but I'll show you in a bit more detail on the next slide. So this is the submitted location plan. The application site is indicated by the red line boundary. It's roughly about 6,000 square metres, and the development boundary for Ruthven is indicated by the orange line on this plan. As you can see, the application site is dissected by the A926, where an area of ground to the north, which the boundary follows the existing road line and an existing access track to the west and the north, and existing residential properties here to the east. And you've got the slightly larger area of the application site to the south side of the public road, where there's 5 existing agricultural buildings, a mixture of traditional buildings and more modern agricultural buildings. And again, this area of the site is delineated by an existing field boundary down the west side and an existing field margin along the southern boundary, and neighbours Bridgend Farmhouse to the east here. This slide also indicates the location of a couple of listed buildings that are in the vicinity of the site, but as you can see, they are intervening existing dwellings and established woodland to the north and the east of the site here. So this slide shows an aerial imagery of the site. As I said, you can see existing residential properties to the east or the north section of the site, where their principal elevations face east. And we've got Bridgend Farmhouse on the south side in this region here, where its principal elevation faces south. You've got the established woodland, which runs to the north and the east, which follows the line of the River Isla, which forms part of the River Tay Sack. Just in terms of impacts upon the special area conservation, given the distances involved between the application site and the protected watercourse, it's unlikely there will be any unacceptable impact upon the qualifying interests of the SAC, and there is a condition to regulate precise details of drainage and a construction method statement, which is suggested by in the conditions as well, to kind of prevent any pollution of the watercourse during the construction activities. The ground surrounding the watercourse is quite steeply sloping down from the application site towards the watercourse, and the site isn't indicated as being on any flood risk maps as produced by SEPA. And to the west and the south of the application site, as you can see here, it's out with the development boundary and it's non-prime agricultural land. So this is an indicative layout that's been provided by the applicant. As you can see, we've got 5 houses indicated in the area to the south of the site, where an existing access onto the A926 would be utilised, and 4 dwellings to the north of the public road, where access would be taken from an existing access track, where it's junction to the public road slightly further to the west in this area here. The application has actually been amended during its lifetime to remove a 10th dwelling that was indicated roughly in this region here, but in order to improve the development, this has been removed from the proposal. Although this application is only for planning permission in principle and this layout is indicative, it does give us an example of how 9 dwellings could be accommodated on the site, where a reasonable residential environment could be provided for the proposed dwellings, and sufficient garden, ground and parking provision, as well as maintaining the amenity of existing residential properties. So we have received 10 letters of representation. These have been received from residents that mainly stay in the surrounding area, and as alluded to, they have raised concerns in terms of impacts upon amenity of existing dwellings, but as the slide shows here, 9 dwellings could be achieved on the site where sufficient distances are maintained between existing properties and proposed properties. So again, just to highlight the point that design details of the proposed house types haven't been provided at the time because it's only a planning permission in principle application, but that matter would be determined as part of any kind of subsequent detailed application. This slide here is taken from slightly further west of the site, looking northwest towards the application site on the A926. And again, you can see the site straddles the public road, where on the north we've got this open area of ground with the existing cottages to the east, and we've got the existing farm buildings which are located on the right hand side of the image, which are on the south side of the site, where you can see we've got the traditional buildings nearer the public road, and we've got the more modern farm buildings and further to the right hand side, to the rear of the site here. And that roof pitch you can just see with the white edging, that's the Bridge End farmhouse in the background there. It also gives you a good indication of the existing landscape context of the site. We've got quite a lot of established planting to the north, which is on the left-hand side of the image here. And it gives you an indication that there are a mix of existing buildings in the area. So in terms of concerns raised by third parties, impact upon road network and pedestrian and traffic safety were one of the key concerns raised. And as alluded to in the earlier slides, existing access points would be utilised, and our colleagues in the road service have considered these matters, and they offer no objection subject to suggested conditions such as a scheme for improvements of the accesses and provision of visibility displays and appropriate on-site parking. In terms of public transport provision, there is an existing Hail and Ride bus service serving Ruthven, and it connects the Ruthven to Alyth and Kirriemuir, where there are onward travel links available in those towns. And also children residing within Ruthven would be entitled to school buses to early primary school and Webster's High. So in terms of other concerns raised, there were issues regarding lack of services and infrastructure. However, as suggested, there are transport links to nearby towns, larger towns where existing services exist, and affordable housing contribution is sought be a suggested condition equivalent of 2.25 houses in line with the local development plan policy. And there's no reason to consider that the proposal would result in the requirement for any additional contribution in that regard. Concerns were raised also regarding the impacts upon the capacity of Alyth GP surgery, and obviously Alyth out with Angus. We've discussed this with Perth and Kinross Council, and they've advised that there be no requirement or provision for contribution towards this GP practice. So this slide here, although the previous image was dated from only 2023, these images illustrate the condition of the buildings on the site, and as you can see in this top image here, part of this Steddon building has fallen down in the last year. So there are 3 stone buildings located in the south area of the site, a mix of roof coverings and 2 Dutch barn type structures similar to this one here are further south within the southern area of the site. While it would be desirable to see the retention of the stone-built buildings, the structural report submitted from the applicant indicates that there are several issues and challenges that would make it difficult to reuse these stone buildings, and the applicant has indicated that stone down takings would be reused in any detailed proposal that would come forward on the site. The stone-built buildings on this area of the site are potentially favourable for bats. A bat survey has been carried out where 11 small roofs were identified within 2 of the structures. And an ecology survey has also been carried out where signs of pine marting using the site for foraging and commuting. However, both reports conclude that it's unlikely that the proposal would have any significant impact upon any protected species, and they have included suggested mitigation such as the inclusion of bat boxes and specific timings of works to ensure that the development wouldn't have any unacceptable impacts. Furthermore, Nature Scot have been consulted on the proposal and they've offered no objection, and there are suggested conditions to ensure that the development is carried out in accordance with the recommendations in the submitted reports. So obviously one of the remaining concerns raised by third parties were in relation to previous refusals on the application site. So I thought it would be helpful just to show you this slide here. So this is the 2009 application that was refused by Development Standards Committee. As you can see, this application was much larger than the current proposal, where the development boundary is roughly in this area here, because as you can see, the existing stone buildings and the current application site would run roughly down this line here, incorporating this area to the south as well. So this previous application was much larger. It did extend quite a considerable distance out with the development boundary, and it was considered against the relevant local plan at that time. So that previous refusal would have a limited weight in the determination of this application. So just turning back to the current proposal, again, this is the indicative site layout provided by the applicant. So the application relates to a site that's predominantly within the Ruthven development boundary. It's an appropriate scale and nature to the site. It wouldn't result in any unacceptable impacts upon agricultural land. So the principle of erecting 9 houses on an unallocated site within a development boundary is generally in accordance with both local and national policies. And in this instance, we've had no objection from consultees. The matters raised in objection to the proposal by third parties have been considered and where appropriate are addressed by planning conditions. And there's no reason to conclude that a detailed scheme could not be achieved on the site in a manner that doesn't give rise to any unacceptable impact on amenity, natural and built environment, road safety or other infrastructure matters subject to proposed planning conditions, and the application is recommended for approval as detailed in the report before members.
Thanks, Ms Porter. Are there any questions from Ms Porter on this? We'll start with Councillor Beattie first.
Yeah, thanks, Ms Porter. I've got a few questions, pretty brief, and I've got one question for Mr Hudson, actually, if he's...
So based on the scale of the development, it would be delegated unless there's obviously the same level of objection, because the current application is before you due to the level of objection.
And the next thing as well is that...
You could recommend conditions, yes, obviously a variation to the report. However, our roads colleagues have considered the application and are of no objection to it. But obviously, if that's something that you feel is...
I think that would be something worth having. And the other thing, the question for Mr Hudson, if he's available there, given that the increase in the number of properties there, could this area qualify for a speed reduction from 60 to 40?
Yeah, happy to take that, Councillor Beattie. Our speed limit strategy makes reference to frontage development. So it appears that from the plan that the houses take access off a couple of existing drives, if you like, so there wouldn't be sufficient frontage development to consider a reduced speed limit.
Okay, thanks, Mr Hudson.
Sorry, Councillor Melville.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. It's largely, so I was going to ask a question about the social housing situation, but you've answered that. So in terms of the design, I appreciate we don't have designs as yet, but we want to make sure that our communities look and feel cohesive. So my question is, how will we work with the developer to ensure that any new homes are in keeping with the site and character of surrounding properties?
Yes, so as you suggested, it would be dealt with as part of the detailed application that comes forward, and that we would assess that in its own individual merit at that time against the relevant design guidance. However, I think in this instance, one of the points put forward by the applicant at this stage is that they would intend to reuse the stone down takings from the existing buildings, which I think would help it integrate pretty well into the existing building group in that area.
You okay? Okay with that, Councillor Melville? Yeah. Okay, Councillor Doran.
Thank you. My question related to the Community Council that was consulted on this. Could you tell us which Community Council was contacted for that? And also, I'd be interested in exploring the idea of the bus stop as well, although looking at the road, I'm not quite sure if there's going to be sufficient space to put one on there, but I think it's worth exploring that given the issues that people travelling at night and in the dark. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for your question there. If you just hang on 2 seconds, I'll just double check which Community Council were sent notification of the application.
Just while Mr. Porter is looking for that, are there going to be any other questions on this one for Councillor Clark? Okay.
Bear with us, apologies. It's always when you want the system to load up that it doesn't. Yeah.
While we're looking for that, Councillor Clark, would like to give a question to Ms. Porter.
Thank you, Convener. It's also a comment. Sorry about that, but this has just happened. I was a councillor in another local authority, and a similar thing happened in a rural area where it was deemed that maybe not able to cut into an area to have a bus stop and a shelter. And I'm sorry, but a child actually lost their life there. So I think we need to consider this as best we can. I appreciate what you're doing. The other thing that when I speak about design, as my colleague was speaking about, is it pertinent to ask at this stage, or maybe you would be thinking about it later, about the attainment of passive house? Because we think about the situation families are finding themselves in fuel poverty. It takes up a huge amount, and if they're over 10% of their income, that's a real problem. So just a thought. I don't know whether I'm allowed to ask that or not.
Sorry, I keep pushing the wrong button. The support and information submitted by the applicant does suggest that they would be looking to incorporate, where's my notes here? The high levels of insulation, air source heat pump and solar panels into the design of the proposed house. But obviously at this stage it is just indicative, but that is something that we could look into as part of any subsequent application. And Councillor Dorn, just to return to your question there, it was Kirriemuir Landward West was the Community Council.
Sorry. Any other questions, Ms. Porter? None in the room, none in line. Okay, thanks very much. We will have the applicant's agent here, Ms. Jonathan Reeve, who's here to take questions only, I believe, Mr. Reeve. You can hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you, yes.
Okay. Are there any questions for the developer? Councillor Melville.
Thank you, Convener. You may already have heard the question that I asked our officers. So really what I want to know from you is that are you looking to keep the design of any of these homes cognizant of the surroundings and in keeping with their character, above and beyond just the reuse of the stone?
Thank you, Councillor Melville. I think this application is for a planning permission in principle, so we haven't taken a lot of detail in the detailed design as yet. But once that develops, we will be putting in a full detailed planning application or matter specified. I think the intention of the applicant is to work with a local developer to develop the house types and everything else. So that's why that level of detail hasn't been put forward at this instance.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Reeve. Are there any other questions for the applicant or agent? No, none in the room, none online. Any comments from members? Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you, Convener. This farmsteading has not been in use as a farmsteading in 2 generations of farmers farming the land. And I think it will be a good alternative to a derelict steading. I do think that we'll have problems trying to retain the character of the mill gang or anything that's not practical in the building, but that's my comment. Just.
Thanks, Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Braze.
Well, basically, I would just echo what Councillor Nicholl has just said. It is a disused steading, it's a brownfield site, and better put to good use.
Thanks, Councillor Braze. Councillor Melville.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. I completely agree with what Councillor Nicholl and Councillor Braze have just said. I'm pleased to see that it will be also making a contribution to our social housing stock. It's incredibly important, given the housing emergency that we are in, that we provide homes for people who need them. And so, yeah, I support it. Thanks.
Councillor Duff.
Yes, I was just going to say it's good to see housing in rural parts of Angus supported by officers. That's good to see. I also like the 2.25 contribution for social housing, and I'd also support a condition on the bus stop. As I understand our policy, we provide bus stops for service buses, but not for school buses. So it might be appropriate to ask a developer to contribute for a bus stop for to deal with school pupils waiting on the road. And I know that's not a huge additional expense. I think that's a reasonable ask of the developer, and I would propose we do that.
Councillor Durden.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that, and to explore the bus stop, I think that would be a good idea. There is also a service bus that's there, that area as well.
Okay, Councillor Brace, you coming back again?
Yes, just a bus shelter is what we needed, not just a bus stop, I would suggest, for parents getting on the bus.
Okay, point taken, Councillor Brace. Okay, yeah, okay, I think we've heard all the questions and comments in the room. I think that's been well discussed, well documented on here, and I think we I've mentioned that, that planning matters here have been considered. New homes, sites not allocated or protected for any other specific purpose. So I'm happy to move it, subject to conditions being amended to consider the applicant considering a bus stop, a bleak bus shelter for either school services or scheduled services. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Melville, are there any amendments? No, thank you everyone. In that case, planning application number 24/00254/PPPL is hereby approved. That brings the meeting of Development Standards to an end. Today, thanks for all your contributions everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, Convener.